Deep in the northern wilderness, where winter shows no mercy, Ranger Elias Grant discovers two wolf pups buried in snow. Against all wisdom, he brings them to his cabin, warming their frozen bodies through the night. At dawn, their mother appears, not to attack but to lead. Following her through the frozen forest, Elias discovers a hidden cabin containing remnants of his father's life, the same father who vanished in these woods 20 years ago. The journals, the photographs, all guarded by this wolf family. What ancient promise connected his father to these wolves? What secrets lie buried in those weathered pages? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The old truck's engine protested as Elias Grant navigated the final stretch of snow-packed road to the ranger station. 35 years, and this drive never got easier. The wooden outpost emerged through the pines. A small wisp of smoke from the chimney, the only sign of life against the gathering twilight. He parked beside the woodpile, joints creaking as he stepped into the knee-deep snow. The cold hit like a physical blow, bitter, unforgiving, familiar. Inside, he lit the kerosene lamp on the desk, illuminating walls covered with maps, each marked with his father's distinctive handwriting. Marcus Grant's last known coordinates, his patrol routes, his theories about wolf migration patterns that had earned him skepticism from other rangers. Elias hung his coat and placed his worn leather journal beside his father's weather-beaten one. 2 generations of observations bound in faded covers, one continuing where the other had abruptly ended. Another season, he murmured to the empty cabin. He stoked the dying embers in the wood stove and added logs, his movements practiced and efficient. The radio crackled from its spot on the shelf. North Ridge to Sentinel Point. Come in, Sentinel. Elias adjusted the frequency. Sentinel Point, copy. Grant, that you? Thought Jackson was taking over this season? Jackson's wife is expecting. I volunteered for one more winter. A pause. Retirement papers still waiting on my desk. Send them in spring, Howard. If I'm still here. You've been saying that for 10 years. Someday it'll be true. The radio hissed static. Storm system moving in faster than predicted. Could be the big one. Might want to complete your first patrol by tomorrow afternoon. Copy that. Sentinel out. Elias opened his father's old footlocker, the brass key always around his neck. Inside lay Marcus Grant's ceremonial ranger hat, preserved in plastic. Beneath it, a framed photograph, Marcus in his 30s, standing proudly before this same cabin. The shadow of Elias's mother in the doorway, her face turned away. From the wall, his father watched through the glass of a dozen photographs, always with that same expression, part determination, part wonder. In the last photo taken before his disappearance, something else had entered his eyes. A secret knowledge, a purpose. Elias opened his own journal, comparing his latest wildlife census with the previous year's. Moose down 12%. Caribou stable. Wolf sightings up nearly 30%, concentrated in the northwest quadrant. Just as his father had predicted 20 years ago, he traced his finger over a map notation in his father's handwriting. They're not just migrating, they're returning. The desk drawer stuck, as it always did in damp weather. Elias pulled harder, revealing his father's service revolver, still in its holster. Beside it lay an envelope, yellowed with age, addressed to him in his father's hand. For Elias, open only when you're ready to understand. 20 years, and he still hadn't opened it. Tonight wouldn't be the night either. Outside, the wind picked up, driving snow against the windows. In that sound, Elias sometimes imagined he heard voices or the distant howl of wolves. His father had believed the wolves were trying to communicate something. The other rangers had called it the ramblings of a man too long in isolation. You weren't crazy, Elias said to the photographs. Just ahead of your time. He unfolded the latest weather report. The storm would hit hard by tomorrow evening, sealing the mountain pass until spring thaw. As always, he'd be alone with the wilderness and his questions. From his pack, he removed the old tin compass that had been his father's. The needle swung wildly, then pointed northwest. toward the area his father had disappeared, where the wolves now gathered, the same direction it always pointed, regardless of magnetic north. Elias closed his hand around it, feeling its familiar weight. One more winter, one more chance to find the answers that had eluded him for 2 decades. Tomorrow's patrol would take him to the northwest ridge. Perhaps this time he'd finally follow where the compass led. Morning came grudgingly, the darkness yielding to a gray twilight that barely deserved the name dawn. Elias checked the thermometer outside his window, 22 below. The storm was still hours away, but its harbingers, lowering clouds and a peculiar stillness, had already arrived. He dressed methodically, thermal underwear, wool shirt, insulated pants, double-layered socks, each item worn smooth with years of use. His father had taught him that cotton kills in the wilderness. Wool keeps you warm even when wet. Lessons passed from father to son, like the badge they'd both worn. Breakfast was strong coffee and oatmeal with dried berries he'd collected last fall. Simple fare that hadn't changed in 30 years. The radio offered nothing but static, the mountains already interfering with transmission. From the shelf above his desk, Elias retrieved a carved wooden box. Inside rested a small leather-bound book, his father's field guide to wolf behavior. Unlike the official manuals, this one contained observations no science had validated, notations about pack structures more complex than documentaries suggested, communication patterns that hinted at something beyond instinct. The margins contained sketches, wolves with eyes too knowing, postures too deliberate. And everywhere his father's question marks, as if even he couldn't believe what he was witnessing. Elias slipped the book into his breast pocket. A talisman. A compass of another sort. He shouldered his pack, checked his supplies one final time. Water, emergency rations, first aid kit, signal flares, snowshoes lashed to the outside. The weight felt right against his back, a familiar burden. On the wall calendar, he marked the date with an X, December 18th, 20 years to the day since his father had vanished. Coincidence, he muttered. Though he didn't believe it, outside the snow squeaked beneath his boots. Cold enough to sound like breaking glass. His breath clouded, then crystallized in his beard. The forest stood silent, the kind of silence that felt like held breath. Elias paused at the edge of the clearing, studying the tree line. Something moved between the trunks, a shadow darker than the others. He narrowed his eyes, but it was gone. The path led northwest, following a ridge that overlooked the valley below. His father's favorite patrol route. Today, Elias would follow it to its end, beyond the markers on the official maps. The place where Marcus Grant had last been seen. The hiking was difficult, the snow deceptively deep in drifted areas. An hour in, he found the first unexpected sign, a fallen pine with claw marks scored deep in its bark. Wolf marks, but unusually high, almost at Elias's eye level. He photographed them, measuring with his gloved hand for scale. The trail narrowed as he climbed higher. Here the wind had sculpted the snow into waves, like a frozen ocean. Beautiful, if you weren't conscious of its deadly potential. At the crest of the ridge, Elias stopped. Below spread a view that never failed to humble him. Miles of unbroken wilderness, white and emerald, stretching to a horizon of jagged peaks. The vastness made human concerns seem trivial, yet it was here, facing this very view, that his father had written his last log entry. "They're trying to show me something. I need to follow." Elias removed his gloves despite the cold, to run his fingertips over a notch in a nearby pine. One of his father's trail markers nearly grown over now. Beside it, a newer mark. 3 parallel lines scored into the bark, still resinous. He crouched, studying the snow. Tracks circled the base of the tree, wolf prints, but arranged in a pattern too regular to be random, almost like a signature. From his pocket, he withdrew the small carved totem his father had left on his desk the day he disappeared. A wolf rendered in dark wood, head raised as if calling. The underside bore a single symbol, carefully etched, 3 parallel lines. Elias looked from the carving to the marks on the tree. His pulse quickened. 20 years of wondering, of searching, of doubting. The wind shifted, carrying a sound so faint it might have been imagination. A lone howl, answered by another, more distant still. "I'm listening," Elias whispered to the wilderness. "Show me!" The storm arrived with sudden fury. One moment Elias stood beneath a leaden sky. The next, he was enveloped in a world of white. The temperature plummeted as the wind rose, carrying ice crystals that stung any exposed skin like tiny needles. He'd expected this, but not so soon. The forecast had given him at least 4 more hours. Microclimate, he muttered, his father's favorite explanation for the mountain's unpredictability. Visibility dropped to mere feet. The ridge path, treacherous in good conditions, became deadly. Elias considered turning back, but the cabin was now as far as pressing forward to the emergency shelter his father had built near the northwestern boundary. He trudged on, navigating more by memory and instinct than sight. Snow accumulated on his shoulders and pack, adding weight with every step. The cold penetrated layers of wool and thermal fabric, reaching for his core with icy fingers. 2 hours into the blizzard, Elias knew he'd made a miscalculation. The shelter should have appeared by now. The storm had disoriented him, pushed him off course. Survival training took over. Find natural shelter, conserve energy. Wait it out, a rock outcropping appeared through the curtain of white, a small mercy. It created a modest windbreak, enough to establish a temporary refuge. Elias worked quickly, using his emergency snow shovel to carve out a deeper recess beneath the overhang. With shelter secured, he allowed himself to feel the first tendrils of concern. The radio at his belt remained silent. No signal penetrated this storm. If conditions worsened, no one would find him until spring, just like his father. He pushed the thought away, focusing on immediate needs. Unpacking his emergency kit, he retrieved the small tin box containing fire-starting materials. Beneath the overhang, protected from direct snowfall, he might manage a small flame. The storm's voice rose to a howl as darkness fell, blending day into night without transition. Elias fed small twigs into his struggling fire, each one a negotiation with the wind. The tiny flame cast dancing shadows against the rock wall, offering more psychological comfort than actual warmth. That's when he heard it, a sound so faint it nearly vanished beneath the storm's fury. A whimper, then another. Elias went still, listening. Not the wind, something alive. He reached for his flashlight, directing its beam into the swirling snow. Nothing. The sound came again. From his right, closer to the ground, following the sound, he discovered a small depression in the snow, partially hidden by a fallen branch. As he brushed away the accumulating powder, his light revealed a patch of gray fur. "God Almighty," he whispered. 2 wolf pups, no more than a few months old, huddled together in a shallow depression. Their eyes, barely open, reflected his flashlight with a desperate gleam. Their fur was encrusted with ice, bodies trembling violently. Every wilderness protocol, every ranger regulation screamed in Elias's mind, never interfere with wildlife. Nature's way is harsh but necessary. Human intervention causes more harm than good. Yet as he stared at the pups, seconds from freezing to death, another voice spoke. His father's voice. "Compassion isn't just for people, son. It's what separates us from the indifference of nature." The smaller pup made a sound that pierced Elias's chest. Not quite a howl, more like a cry. A call for help that transcended species. His decision made itself. Elias removed his outer coat, ignoring the immediate bite of cold against his inner layers. Carefully, he wrapped the trembling pups together, creating a bundle he could secure inside his coat when he put it back on. Against his chest, the pups' cold bodies felt like ice packs. They squirmed weakly, then grew still, conserving energy, surrendering to whatever fate this strange development brought. The storm intensified, erasing any possibility of continuing to the shelter. Elias reinforced his makeshift refuge, building up snow walls against the wind. The fire sputtered, then died, overcome by gusts that found their way under the outcropping. In darkness now, he cradled the wolf pups against his body heat, a living hot water bottle. His hands found a small metal object in his pocket, his father's old silver lighter, engraved with a mountain range silhouette. The lighter that had failed Marcus on his last patrol. Found later by the search party, Elias clutched it like a talisman, a connection between past and present as the cold settled into his bones. "Hold on," he whispered, though he wasn't sure if he spoke to the pups or himself. Dawn arrived as a subtle lessening of darkness. The storm had moderated from apocalyptic to merely threatening, allowing Elias to assess his situation. His emergency shelter had survived the night, though his body ached from cold and the awkward position he'd maintained to protect the wolf pups. The pups had made it through the night, their small bodies warmer now against his chest. The larger one, with distinctive silver markings around its eyes, had even lapped weakly at melted snow from Elias's palm. The smaller one remained worryingly still, though its breathing had steadied. Elias checked his watch. Nearly 15 hours since he'd left the cabin. Howard would have noticed his missed radio check-in by now, but no search party would launch in these conditions. He studied the sky through gaps in the swirling snow. The storm's heart had passed, but its trailing edge would linger. If he moved now, he might reach the cabin by nightfall. The pups complicated matters. Carrying them would slow him down, tax his already depleted energy. The wilderness protocol was clear. Return them to where he found them. Let nature take its course. Elias knew this was likely a death sentence. The pup's mother was either dead or had abandoned them before the storm. No wolf would leave her young in such conditions otherwise. "Breaking every rule in the book," he muttered, securing the pups inside his coat. The smaller one mewled softly at the disturbance. He dismantled his shelter methodically, erasing signs of human presence as his training demanded. Only the fire's black smudge remained, which the next snowfall would cover. The trek back was punishing. What had been a 6-hour hike in good conditions became an endurance test. Elias navigated by landmarks barely visible through the snow, a distinctive bent pine, a rock formation, the sudden drop where the ridge fell away to the valley. By midday, the storm's grip loosened enough to reveal glimpses of the mountainside below. Elias paused, breathing heavily, to check the pups. The larger one watched him with amber eyes, too intelligent for comfort. The smaller one had begun to shiver, a good sign, its body fighting for heat. Not much farther, he told them, though he knew it was still hours away. As he rounded a familiar curve in the path, Elias stopped short. Fresh tracks crossed his earlier trail. Wolf tracks, large ones, an adult, moving with purpose, not the wandering pattern of hunting, following. A chill that had nothing to do with the temperature ran through him. The tracks paralleled his for 100 yards, then veered into the forest, deliberate, as if the wolf knew exactly where Elias was headed. His hand moved to the service revolver at his hip. Never in 35 years had he fired it at an animal, but the wolf pups in his coat changed the calculation. An adult wolf might see him as a threat, a kidnapper. The cabin appeared through the trees as afternoon light began to fade. Elias approached cautiously, scanning the surrounding forest. The wolf tracks had vanished a mile back, but instinct told him he wasn't alone. Inside, he moved with urgent efficiency. The wood stove still held embers from yesterday morning. He coaxed them back to life, adding kindling, then larger logs. Heat bloomed slowly in the small space. Only then did he remove his coat and examine the pups properly. The silver-masked one squirmed in his hands, surprisingly strong. The smaller one, a female with unusual white-tipped ears, remained lethargic. Elias knew enough about wolf pups to improvise. He warmed milk on the stove, diluted it slightly, and offered it in a shallow tin cup. The stronger pup drank eagerly. He had to drip milk into the smaller one's mouth, watching anxiously as she swallowed reflexively. The radio crackled to life. "North Ridge to Sentinel Point. Grant, do you copy?" Elias hesitated, looking at the pups now settled in a makeshift nest of blankets near the stove. Every regulation prohibited what he'd done. "Sentinel point here," he finally responded. "Storm hit early. Took shelter on the ridge. Made it back about an hour ago. Thank Christ. We were organizing a search for morning. You okay?" "Fine. Radio was down during the worst of it. Anything to report?" Elias watched the wolf pups, thinking of the tracks that had followed him home, of his father's journals filled with observations that his colleagues had dismissed as fantasy. "Nothing unusual," he said. "Just the storm." After signing off, Elias retrieved his father's old camera from the desk drawer, a sturdy 35mm that had documented 2 decades of wilderness observations. He carefully photographed the pups, noting their distinctive markings. Outside, darkness fell. With it came the sensation of being watched. Elias checked the rifle above the door, making sure it was loaded. Then he settled into the chair by the window, the pups sleeping near the stove, and prepared for a long night. Elias woke with a start, the chair creaking beneath him. The cabin was warm, almost uncomfortably so. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving an eerie stillness in its wake. Moonlight reflected off fresh snow, illuminating the clearing around the cabin with an unnatural brightness. Something had woken him. Not a sound, but its absence, the peculiar silence that comes when wildlife holds its breath. The wolf pups slept soundly in their nest of blankets. The smaller one had finally taken milk directly from the cup before falling asleep pressed against her brother. A good sign. Movement caught his eye, a shadow passing before the window. Too deliberate for branches in the wind. Elias reached for the rifle, then stopped. Instead, he moved quietly to the window, careful not to silhouette himself against the cabin's light. There, at the edge of the clearing, a wolf, larger than any he'd seen in these mountains. Her coat was silver-gray, catching moonlight like polished metal. She stood perfectly still, watching the cabin, watching him. Their eyes met through the glass, and Elias felt a jolt of recognition. Not fear, but something more primal. The wolf's gaze held intelligence that went beyond animal instinct, an awareness that made the hair on his neck rise. The wolf pups stirred, as if sensing their mother's presence. The stronger one gave a soft whine. Elias faced an impossible decision. The mother had survived, had tracked her young to his cabin. Protocol dictated returning them immediately, yet the temperature outside remained dangerously low. The smaller pup, still weak, might not survive the transition. As he watched, the wolf circled the cabin deliberately, sniffing at the foundation, the doorframe, the woodpile. Not aggressive, but investigative. She paused beneath the window where Elias stood, raised her head and met his eyes again. Then, inexplicably, she sat. Waited. "What are you doing?" Elias whispered. The wolf's ears twitched at his voice, though it couldn't have carried through the glass. Something nagged at Elias's memory, a passage from his father's journal. He retrieved the leather-bound book from his pack, flipping to an entry marked with a faded red ribbon. April 12th. The alpha female tracked me back to the cabin today. Unlike previous encounters, she displayed no aggression or fear. She circled twice, then sat at the west corner watching. When I emerged, she retreated exactly 20 yards, then stopped. Each time I approached, she maintained this distance, leading me northwest toward the high valley. Is she trying to show me something? Folklore across cultures speaks of wolves as guides, messengers. Science dismisses this as anthropomorphism. But there's something happening here beyond current understanding. The handwriting grew more hurried, excited. She left a deer haunch at the clearing edge last night after I shared dried beef with her pack. An exchange? Communication? I've named her Sylvia for her unusual coloring. My colleagues would revoke my credentials if they knew. Elias looked from the journal to the wolf outside his window. Silver-grey coat, distinctive white blaze on her chest. "Sylvia?" he murmured. The wolf's ears pricked forward. Impossible. His father's observations were from nearly 25 years ago. Wolves rarely live beyond 10 to 12 years in the wild, yet the animal watching his cabin matched his father's description perfectly. down to the white chest, marking shaped like a crescent moon. The pups whimpered again, louder. The wolf's head turned toward the sound, nostrils flaring. Elias made his decision. He pulled on his coat and reached for his father's old, bone-handled hunting knife. Not a weapon tonight, but a symbol of respect for the wilderness and its code. "I'm coming out," he said softly, though he knew the wolf couldn't understand. "Don't run!" He opened the door slowly, the cold air rushing in like a living thing. The wolf stood, muscles tensing, but didn't flee. Her eyes reflected moonlight, ancient and knowing. Elias stepped onto the porch, then down to the snow-covered ground. The wolf backed away, maintaining exactly the distance his father had noted. 20 yards, no more, no less. "Your pups are safe," Elias said. "The little one needs another day. Then I'll bring them to you." The wolf watched him, head slightly tilted. Then she turned, took several steps toward the tree line, and looked back, just as his father had described. An invitation, a beckoning. Elias hesitated, looking back at the warmth of the cabin, the security it represented. The pups would be fine for a short time, sleeping near the stove. The wolf waited, her breath clouding in the frigid air. 20 years of questions, of searching for answers about his father's disappearance. Elias stepped forward. Following the path the wolf had broken through the snow. "Show me," he said. The wolf led Elias along a winding path that no trail map documented. They moved in silence, broken only by the crunch of snow beneath his boots and the occasional soft woof of her breath. She maintained her distance, close enough to follow, far enough to flee if threatened. Elias recognized none of the terrain, despite decades patrolling these mountains. They traversed a narrow passage between towering rock faces, then descended into a valley he'd never seen, sheltered by steep slopes that would hide it from aerial surveys. His training warned against following unknown paths at night, especially behind a wild predator. But there was nothing threatening in the wolf's demeanor. She paused regularly, looking back as if checking that he still followed, waiting when he slowed to navigate difficult sections. After nearly an hour, the wolf stopped at a rock outcropping that jutted from the hillside like the prow of a ship. She sniffed along its base, then looked at Elias expectantly. He approached cautiously. The outcropping appeared solid, unremarkable, yet the wolf's behavior suggested otherwise. She pawed at a section where snow had drifted against the rock face. Elias knelt, brushing away snow to reveal nothing, just solid rock. The wolf made a sound, not quite a whine, not quite a growl, and moved along the outcropping's edge, disappearing around its corner. When Elias followed, he found not the wolf, but a narrow opening, a vertical crack in the rock face barely wide enough for a man to slip through sideways. No casual observer would notice it. He hesitated. Caves could be dangerous, unstable, home to hibernating predators, or simply dead ends where one could become trapped. His flashlight revealed nothing but darkness beyond the entrance. A soft whine echoed from within. The wolf had gone inside. "This is how rangers die," Elias muttered, yet found himself squeezing through the opening anyway. The passage widened immediately into a tunnel tall enough to stand in. His flashlight beam caught something unexpected on the wall, a marking. 3 vertical lines carved into the stone, identical to those on his father's totem and the tree near the ridge. The tunnel curved gently downward, showing signs of human modification. Rough-hewn steps where the slope steepened, supports bracing potential weak points. This was no natural formation. It ended abruptly, opening into a space so large his flashlight couldn't illuminate its boundaries. The air felt different here, warmer, heavy with unfamiliar scents. As Elias moved forward, his light caught a dark shape ahead. Not the wolf, but something man-made. A structure, a cabin, built inside the cave. It was small but solid, constructed of logs and stone. A thin wisp of smoke rose from its stone chimney, disappearing into the darkness above. Someone was here, living here. Elias drew his father's knife, approaching cautiously. The door of the cabin stood slightly ajar. No sound came from within. No light except the dull red glow of banked embers visible through a small window. The wolf appeared from behind the structure, padding silently to the door. She looked at Elias, then pushed the door wider with her muzzle and entered. "Hello," Elias called, his voice echoing strangely in the cavern. "Anyone there?" Silence answered. He reached the door, nudging it fully open with his boot. The cabin's interior gradually revealed itself in his flashlight beam. A single room, rustic but well-equipped. A bed, a table with a single chair. Shelves lined with books, jars, and equipment. On the table lay an open notebook, a pencil beside it, as if the writer had just stepped away. Elias approached, shining his light on the page. The handwriting was instantly familiar, the same as in the journals he'd been studying for 20 years. His father's handwriting, recent, dated. Just 3 months ago, Elias's hand trembled as he turned to the first page, where a single photograph was taped. His father, older, weathered but unmistakably alive, standing beside the silver wolf. Both looked directly at the camera, a strange partnership captured in faded color. The wolf had settled on a worn rug near the stone fireplace, watching Elias with those intelligent eyes. Beneath the rug, something protruded slightly, the corner of a metal box. Elias knelt, lifting the rug. A trap door was built into the floor, secured with a combination lock. Carved into the wood of the door was a date, the day before his father disappeared. From his pocket, Elias withdrew the small copper object he always carried, his father's old fishing lure, bent into a distinctive shape from the time they'd caught a monster pike in the summer of '89. He studied the combination lock, then carefully aligned the numbers to match that date, 10-17-05. The lock opened with a soft click. The trapdoor opened to reveal a narrow wooden ladder descending into darkness. Elias directed his flashlight downward, illuminating a small chamber lined with metal shelving. The wolf watched from her place by the fireplace, making no move to follow as he lowered himself through the opening. The room below felt like a vault or laboratory. Shelves held dozens of labeled specimens in glass jars, plants, soil samples, and things Elias couldn't immediately identify. A small refrigeration unit hummed in the corner, powered by what appeared to be a rudimentary solar setup with batteries. Against the far wall stood a wooden filing cabinet. Elias pulled open the top drawer to find meticulously organized folders, each labeled by date. He selected one at random and found detailed observations of wolf behavior, far more extensive than anything in his father's official journals. The bottom drawer contained something different: medical records, his father's name at the top of each page. Elias scanned the topmost document, breath catching as he read the diagnosis. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer, terminal, dated 3 weeks before his father's disappearance. "So that's why you left," Elias whispered, but the medical reports continued well past the expected survival timeline. 6 months later, a year, 5 years, blood work, vitals, handwritten notes about symptoms and treatments. His father had been documenting his own survival, which should have been impossible. The most recent entry was dated just 2 months ago. A leather-bound journal occupied a special place on the central workbench. Unlike the clinical reports, this appeared personal, intimate. Elias hesitated, then opened it to the first entry, October 19th, 2005, 2 days since I left. "The pain is manageable today. Dr. Winters gave me 3 to 4 months. I've accepted what's coming, but couldn't bear for Elias to watch. Better he thinks I died quickly in the wilderness than wasted away in a hospital bed. The cabin is well stocked. I should have sufficient morphine to ease the final stages. October 28th, 2005. Sylvia found me again today. I've known this wolf for 6 years, yet she still surprises me. She brought her pack to the clearing outside. Not threatening, observing. When I stepped outside in pain, barely able to stand, the pack surrounded me. Not attacking. Something else. Then Sylvia approached alone and dropped a root at my feet. I recognized it, alpine moonwort. Indigenous people used it for pain. How could she know? November 11th, 2005. I'm consuming the root preparation daily. The pain has diminished remarkably. I've stretched the morphine supply. Something is happening beyond placebo effect. Blood samples show changes I can't explain with my limited equipment. Elias flipped forward several months. March 30th, 2006. By all medical predictions, I should be dead. Instead, the tumor markers are declining. I've documented everything meticulously, though I don't expect anyone will ever see this work. Sylvia continues to bring specific plants. I've identified 14 distinct species, each with reported medicinal properties. How does she select them? The communication between us has developed beyond anything science would accept, Elias continued through the journal, watching his father's handwriting strengthen over the entries. The clinical detachment of a scientist gradually blended with the wonder of a man witnessing something beyond rational explanation. January 15th, 2010. 5 years. Complete remission according to my tests. I should return to civilization, share what I've learned, reunite with Elias, but the implications are too vast, too dangerous. Pharmaceutical companies would destroy these woods, hunt these wolves to extinction. Some knowledge must be protected until humanity is ready. On a small side table, Elias found a wooden box with intricate carvings. Inside lay a collection of dried plants and roots, each in a separate compartment with handwritten labels. The centerpiece was a leather pouch containing what looked like tea, a mixture of crumbled leaves, roots, and bark. Attached was a note in his father's hand, the remedy. Full preparation instructions in Journal 17. The wolf gave a soft whine from above. Elias looked up to see her watching through the trapdoor, her expression almost impatient. "He's alive, isn't he?" Elias asked. "You're taking me to him." The wolf turned away, moving out of sight. Elias quickly gathered several journals, the leather pouch, and his father's most recent medical records. As he climbed back up the ladder, his elbow knocked against a small wooden frame that had been propped against the wall. It was a hand-drawn map, unlike the official Forest Service charts. It showed landmarks Elias had never seen documented: the hidden valley, the cave entrance, and another location marked with the 3-line symbol and a single word: sanctuary. Elias committed the map to memory before returning it to its place. Above, the wolf waited by the cabin door, looking over her shoulder at him. The message was clear: time to move on. "Where is he?" Elias asked, knowing he wouldn't get an answer he could understand. Yet as he followed the wolf back into the tunnel, he felt closer to his father than he had in 20 years. Not just to the memory of the man, but to the living presence that somehow lingered in these woods. Outside, the night sky had begun to lighten toward dawn. Dawn painted the snow-covered valley in hues of rose and gold. The wolf led Elias back toward his cabin, through a route more direct than their outbound journey. His mind raced with questions, processing what he'd discovered in his father's hidden laboratory. The cabin appeared ahead, smoke still rising from its chimney. Elias quickened his pace, concerned for the wolf pups left alone for hours. The wolf stopped at the edge of the clearing, her posture suddenly alert. She raised her head, testing the air. Then unexpectedly she growled, a low rumble of warning. Elias scanned the area, seeing nothing amiss. Then he spotted it, a snowmobile partially concealed behind the woodpile. Someone had arrived during his absence. "Howard," he muttered. His supervisor must have come to check on him after the storm. The wolf melted into the forest, disappearing so completely it seemed she had never been there. Elias approached the cabin cautiously, noting fresh boot prints in the snow. Not Howard's distinctive ranger's boots, but something else. Civilian snow boots with an unfamiliar tread pattern. The door stood ajar. Elias drew his father's knife and entered slowly. A man in an expensive-looking snowsuit stood by the wood stove, warming his hands. He turned as Elias entered, revealing a face Elias vaguely recognized, but couldn't immediately place. "Ranger Grant," the man said smoothly. "Out for an early morning hike? Dangerous after such a storm. Who are you?" Elias asked, eyes darting to the makeshift nest where the wolf pups had been. "It was empty," the man smiled. "Richard Vance, Northland Pharmaceuticals. We met at a conservation fundraiser in Boise, perhaps 5 years ago." The name clicked. Northland was one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the country, known for bioprospecting, finding natural compounds that could be developed into medications. "What are you doing in my cabin?" Vance gestured to the silent radio. "When you missed 2 check-ins, your supervisor called our research outpost. We're closer than the ranger station. They volunteered to make sure you hadn't frozen to death." He paused. "Though you seem remarkably fit for a man your age who spent the night in a blizzard, something felt wrong." The explanation was plausible, yet Vance seemed too comfortable, too unsurprised by Elias's absence. "Where are they?" Elias asked. "Where are what?" "There were 2 wolf pups in that blanket by the stove." Vance's expression didn't change. "I haven't seen any wolves, Ranger Grant. Perhaps you should sit down. Hypothermia can cause confusion, even hallucinations." Elias moved to the desk where he'd left his father's journal. It was gone. "So was the camera with the photos of the pups. Looking for something?" Vance asked, reaching into his pocket to produce a small leather-bound book. "Fascinating reading. Your father had quite the imagination." Elias felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter air. "That's private property?" "Indeed. Yet the content is remarkably similar to research my company has been conducting for years." Vance set the journal on the table, but kept his hand on it. "Wolf blood contains unique compounds, antibodies, enzymes, proteins unlike anything in other canids. We've synthesized several promising pharmaceutical candidates." He stepped closer. "But your father's notes suggest something more. A synergistic effect between wolf biology and certain alpine plants. A combination we've never considered." Elias tensed. "You had no right to read that. Perhaps not. But now that I have..." Vance's smile faded. "Where is he, Ranger Grant? Where is Marcus?" "My father disappeared 20 years ago. Presumed dead. Yet his journal entries continue to last month." Vance pulled out a satellite phone. "My team is standing by. We've been monitoring your father's movements for months, but he's remarkably elusive. These mountains are about to be designated for resource development, logging, mining. Your father's hidden research site will be bulldozed unless we find it first and document the medicinal properties of what's there." The implications hit Elias like a physical blow. His father's fears had been justified. His discovery, whatever its full nature, was indeed valuable enough to attract predators. "I can't help you," Elias said. "No." Vance reached into his other pocket and withdrew a glass vial containing dark red liquid. "This was in your pack, Ranger Grant. Blood samples. Not human. Not normal wolf either." He studied Elias's expression. "You've seen them, haven't you? The changed ones?" Elias kept his face neutral, though his mind raced. What was Vance talking about? Changed ones? "I don't know what you mean." "No?" Vance pulled something else from his pocket. A folded photograph, newer than the one Elias had found in the hidden cabin. He placed it on the table between them. The image showed a man at the edge of a forest clearing. Tall, bearded, but unmistakably his father, though much aged. He stood upright, but with a strange posture, almost animal-like. His eyes reflected the camera flash like a wild creature's. Beside him stood the silver wolf. Most disturbing was his father's hand, extended toward the camera, the fingers elongated, the nails darkened and curved like claws. The photograph trembled in Elias's hand. He stared at his father's transformed appearance, the wild eyes, the elongated fingers with claw-like nails. The image challenged everything he understood about biology, about reality itself. "What is this?" Elias whispered. Vance leaned forward. "The unexpected side effect of your father's miracle cure. His cancer journals document it. The remedy saved his life, but triggered adaptive mutations, cellular changes, DNA restructuring." His voice contained equal parts scientific curiosity and hunger. "Your father isn't just living with wolves, Ranger Grant. He's becoming one." Elias recalled passages from the journal. "Changes I can't explain with my limited equipment." But he'd assumed his father meant blood values. "Tumor markers, not physical transformation. That's impossible. 2 decades ago. I would have agreed." Vance retrieved the photo. "But here we are." Think of the applications: cellular regeneration, enhanced immunity, adaptive biology. Your father stumbled onto something revolutionary, something worth billions. Elias's mind raced. Where are the wolf pups? Safe. My colleagues have taken them for examination. Vance's expression hardened. Now let's stop pretending. The wolf led you to him, didn't she? To his laboratory. Marcus's condition is accelerating. According to our calculations, he has days, perhaps hours, before the transformation becomes irreversible. Transformation into what exactly? We don't know. Something between human and wolf. His recent journal entries become increasingly primitive. The handwriting deteriorates, thoughts fragment. The human mind being subsumed. Vance checked his watch. My team is mobilizing. With or without your help, we will find Marcus Grant and document his condition. To help him? Elias asked, knowing the answer. To understand the process. To isolate the compounds responsible. Vance didn't bother with pretense. Your father's condition may be irreversible, but his discovery could save millions. Outside, the distant sound of helicopter rotors broke the morning stillness. That would be my research team, Vance said. Last chance for cooperation, Ranger Grant. Elias's ranger training had prepared him for wilderness survival, search and rescue, even confrontations with poachers. Nothing had prepared him for this. His eyes fell on his father's service revolver hanging by the door. Vance followed his gaze. That would be unwise, the pharmaceutical executive said, revealing a sleek pistol of his own. Corporate espionage is a dangerous business. We come prepared. The helicopter sounds grew louder. They're going to destroy everything, Elias said. The wolves, the habitat, all of it. Progress requires sacrifice. Vance motioned toward the door with his weapon. Outside! You're going to guide us to the sanctuary. Elias felt a surge of alarm. How did Vance know that name? Then he realized they'd been monitoring his father's movements possibly for years. They might know more about Marcus's activities than Elias himself. As they stepped onto the porch, the helicopter appeared over the ridge, its downwash whipping snow into blinding clouds. Elias scanned the tree line, seeing no sign of the silver wolf. Vance shouted over the noise, "You have one chance to save your father, Ranger. Cooperate, and our medical team might stabilize his condition. Resist, and we'll still find him, but without the benefit of your knowledge of his treatment." The helicopter touched down in the clearing, its side door sliding open to reveal 4 men in winter gear, carrying scientific equipment and what were unmistakably tranquilizer rifles. A sudden movement caught Elias's eye, something small and dark flying from the forest edge. It landed in the snow near his feet, his father's carved wolf totem. Elias glanced toward the trees and caught a glimpse of silver fur. The wolf hadn't abandoned him. She was watching, waiting. One of the researchers approached, carrying a metal case. "Dr. Vance, we have the containment unit ready. Tracking shows movement at these coordinates." He handed Vance a GPS device. Elias recognized the location on the small screen, the hidden valley with the cave entrance. They'd already found it. The researcher opened the metal case, revealing 2 small forms beneath a clear lid, the wolf pups, sedated but breathing. "Remarkable specimens," the man said. "Genetic analysis already shows anomalies. They carry markers similar to the subject's blood samples." A cold realization washed over Elias. Not just his father's blood, his father's pups. Somehow, impossibly, Marcus had become enough wolf to mate with the silver female, to produce offspring that were neither fully wolf nor fully human. The bond between Marcus and Sylvia wasn't just partnership. It was family, his family, which made these pups not just wolves, they were his half-siblings. The helicopter blades whipped the air as Elias sat in the rear compartment, wrists zip-tied to the seat frame. Through the window, he watched his cabin shrink to a speck as they rose above the tree line. His mind still reeled from the revelation about the wolf pups, his father's offspring, his own half-siblings. Across from him, Vance studied a tablet displaying topographical maps overlaid with tracking data. 2 researchers monitored the sedated wolf pups in their containment unit. The sight made Elias's jaw clench. Northwest, Vance instructed the pilot. Following this ridge system, they were heading directly toward the hidden valley where Elias had found the cave entrance. He wondered how much they actually knew, whether they had discovered the hidden cabin inside, the laboratory beneath it. "The transformation your father is undergoing," Vance said conversationally, as if discussing the weather, "appears to accelerate with lunar cycles. According to his journals, the full moon triggers hormonal changes, protein synthesis. Tonight is the final phase." Elias glanced at the sky. The storm had cleared, leaving crystalline blue. By nightfall, the moon would rise full and bright. "You can't seriously believe my father is turning into a werewolf," Elias said. Vance laughed. "Folklore often contains kernels of truth, distorted through retelling. Your father isn't becoming a mythological creature, but something scientifically explicable. The medicinal compounds in his remedy contain mutagenic properties. His desperate attempt to cure cancer triggered adaptive cellular changes, drawing on dormant genetic pathways all humans possess, remnants of our evolutionary past. And you think you can control this? Replicate it, isolate it, modify it, apply it selectively." Vance's eyes gleamed with ambition. "Imagine targeted cellular regeneration without the side effects." The helicopter began to descend toward a clearing near the base of the ridge that concealed the valley entrance. Below, Elias saw several all-terrain vehicles and a temporary camp already established. "The pharmaceutical company had been preparing this operation for some time. Your father knew we were closing in," Vance continued. "That's why his journal entries became increasingly erratic. He's been moving the important research materials to what he calls the sanctuary." The mention of the sanctuary sent a chill through Elias. Whatever it was, it clearly held his father's most important discoveries, and likely his father himself. As the helicopter touched down, Elias spotted movement at the camp, a figure being escorted from a tent by armed security personnel. Howard Barnes, his supervisor from the ranger station. When they disembarked, Howard's expression shifted from concern to confusion upon seeing Elias. "Grant? What the hell is going on?" These people claimed they were conducting approved wildlife research. "Official permits," Vance said smoothly, producing documentation. "Signed by the regional director." "Those permits don't cover tranquilizing endangered species or restraining federal employees," Howard countered, nodding toward Elias's bound wrists. "Complicated circumstances," Vance replied. "Ranger Grant's father has been living illegally in a wilderness preserve, interfering with wildlife, conducting unauthorized bioresearch." Howard's eyes widened. "Marcus Grant is alive." "Very much so," Vance said. "And Elias here has been withholding information critical to our approved study." A researcher approached, carrying a worn leather satchel that Elias recognized immediately, his father's field bag, discovered in the hidden cabin. The man opened it to reveal vials of dried plants, handwritten notes, and several syringes containing amber liquid. "Sir, we've identified the compound. It appears to be a concentrated form of what was in the blood samples." The researcher held up a journal. "According to these notes, he calls it the catalyst. It accelerates the transformation process." Vance examined one of the syringes with reverence. "The key component we've been missing." Elias watched in mounting horror as another team member approached with equipment cases. "Tracking signal is strong, Dr. Vance. The subject is approximately 2 miles northwest, in a cave system not documented on any official survey." "The sanctuary. They'd found it. Prepare the capture team," Vance instructed. "Full biological containment protocols. The subject may be dangerous and is definitely contagious." "Contagious?" Elias and Howard asked simultaneously. Vance secured the syringe in a protective case. "Your father's condition appears to be transmissible through bodily fluids, blood, saliva. His journals document experiments with wolves, transforming ordinary specimens into something enhanced. The silver female was his first success." Elias remembered the photograph. his father and Sylvia, partners in something that transcended normal human-animal relationships. Not master and pet, but equals in a shared transformation. "You don't understand what you're dealing with," Elias said. "On the contrary." Vance checked his watch. "In approximately 10 hours, the full moon rises. Your father's transformation will complete, and his human consciousness will likely be permanently subsumed. We need to document the process in its entirety." From the containment unit, one of the wolf pups whimpered in its sedated sleep. Howard stared at the pups, then at Elias, comprehension dawning in his eyes. "Those aren't ordinary wolves." "No," Elias confirmed. "They're family." In that moment, Elias spotted a flash of silver at the forest edge. Sylvia, watching. She had followed the helicopter. Despite everything, she hadn't abandoned her pups or her mate. The research team moved with practiced efficiency, preparing for the expedition to capture Marcus. Elias, still restrained but now under Howard's nominal supervision, watched as they assembled specialized equipment. Tranquilizer rifles, containment stretchers, biohazard suits. "They're treating him like a lab specimen," Elias muttered to Howard. "If what they're saying is true." Howard left the thought unfinished, his weathered face troubled. After 30 years as a ranger, he'd seen many inexplicable things in the wilderness, but nothing like this. Vance approached, now dressed in cold-weather tactical gear. "Ranger Barnes, you'll remain here with the helicopter crew. Ranger Grant will accompany us to help locate and, hopefully, communicate with the subject." "His name is Marcus," Elias said. "He's a person, not a subject." "For now," Vance replied coolly. "According to his own journals, that's increasingly debatable." A researcher handed Vance a satellite phone. After a brief conversation, his expression darkened. "Accelerate preparations. Weather Service reports another storm system moving in by evening. We need to locate and secure the subject before conditions deteriorate." One of the security team approached with Elias's pack, now searched and partially emptied. "Sir, we found these." He handed Vance a small cloth pouch. Vance opened it carefully, revealing a collection of dried berries, dark and wrinkled. "Alpine blackcurrant," he identified, "one of the components in your father's remedy." He studied Elias with new suspicion. "You've been consuming these." Elias said nothing. The berries had been in his pack for months, a habit formed from his father's teaching about wilderness survival and natural medicine. "Check his blood," Vance ordered. A researcher stepped forward with a portable testing kit. "That's unnecessary," Howard protested. "On the contrary." Vance's voice was tight. "These berries contain precursor compounds to what triggered your father's transformation. Even in small doses, they could cause cellular changes." The blood test was quick, a simple finger prick analyzed by a handheld device. The researcher studied the results, then showed them to Vance. Elevated white count, unusual protein markers, early-stage indicators. Vance looked at Elias with scientific fascination. "You've been inadvertently preparing your system, making it receptive to the transformation process." "That's ridiculous," Elias said, though a chill ran through him. He had been consuming wilderness plants his entire career, berries, roots, teas, following his father's examples and journals. "Cut him loose," Vance instructed, "but watch him carefully. If he shows any unusual behavior, restrain him immediately." As a researcher snipped the zip ties from Elias's wrists, Vance received another update via radio from a team already scouting ahead. "They've found an entrance to a cave system matching the tracking coordinates," he announced. "Thermal imaging shows multiple heat signatures inside, human-sized and canine." Howard pulled Elias aside while the team loaded equipment onto ATVs. "I can try to radio for backup," he offered quietly. "This isn't legal, whatever permits their waving around. By the time help arrives, it'll be too late." Elias replied. "The full moon rises in hours. I need to reach my father before they do. You can't seriously believe this transformation business." Elias met his supervisor's gaze. "I've seen enough to know that something extraordinary is happening in these mountains. Something that goes beyond conventional science." Howard studied him, then nodded reluctantly. "What do you need from me?" "Create a distraction when we reach the cave entrance. Something that will give me a chance to slip away and find my father first." The expedition moved out, a convoy of ATVs following the narrow valley trail. Elias rode in the second vehicle, scanning the surrounding forest for any sign of Sylvia. The silver wolf remained hidden, though he sensed her presence. As they approached the coordinates, the valley narrowed between steep rock walls. The lead vehicle stopped, and the team disembarked. Ahead, a dark opening gaped in the mountainside, larger than the entrance Sylvia had shown Elias, clearly the main access to whatever cave system honeycombed the mountain. Vance gathered the capture team for final instructions, while researchers prepared equipment. Elias noted the sun's position, 4 hours until sunset, perhaps 5 until moonrise. While everyone was distracted, Howard slipped something into Elias's pocket. "Found this in your cabin. Thought you might want it." Elias felt the object, small, metal, familiar. His father's old pocket knife, the one with the mother-of-pearl handle that had been a gift from Elias's mother. The blade was unremarkable, but the handle contained something special, a hidden compartment where his father had always kept a single emergency match and a small compass. More importantly, the knife symbolized everything Marcus had taught him about survival and self-reliance in the wilderness. "Thanks," Elias murmured, concealing the knife in his boot. A shout from the cave entrance drew everyone's attention. One of the advanced scouts emerged, excitement visible even through his tactical gear. "We found something," he called. "Some kind of altar chamber, ancient markings, and fresh signs of occupation." Vance's expression hardened with determination. "Let's move. Tranquilizer team on point. Remember, we need the subject alive and minimally damaged." As the team organized into formation, Elias caught Howard's eye. The older ranger nodded almost imperceptibly. They were going in. The cave system opened before them like the throat of some ancient beast, swallowing their flashlight beams in depthless shadow. The air that flowed from the entrance carried unfamiliar scents, mineral, animal, and something else that raised the hair on Elias's neck. Vance's team moved with practiced precision. Specialists taking readings of air composition, temperature gradients, and biological markers. 2 security personnel with tranquilizer rifles led the way, followed by researchers in partial biohazard gear. "Heat signatures indicate movement approximately half a mile in," reported the technician monitoring the thermal imaging equipment. "Multiple subjects, wolf pack," Elias offered. "This mountain has been their den site for generations." Vance gave him a cold look. "According to your father's journals, these aren't ordinary wolves anymore." The passage widened into a cavern where ancient water had carved the limestone into eerie, organic shapes. Stalactites hung like teeth from the ceiling. On the walls, Elias noticed something that made him pause. Handprints in red ochre, faded but distinct. Not modern but ancient. One of the researchers photographed them. Prehistoric cave art, probably thousands of years old. "Focus," Vance instructed. "We're not here for archaeology." As they pushed deeper, the cave system became increasingly complex, branching into multiple corridors. The tracking device led them through the labyrinth with unerring precision. "How are you tracking him?" Elias asked quietly. The technician glanced at Vance, who nodded permission. "Your father's blood contains unique protein markers that emit specific electromagnetic signatures," the technician explained. "We developed sensors calibrated to those emissions." "You've been monitoring him for months," Elias realized, "waiting for the transformation to progress." "Science requires patience," Vance replied without remorse. The passage descended sharply before opening into a vast underground chamber. The team's lights revealed a sight that drew gasps from even the most disciplined researchers. The chamber was clearly natural in origin, but had been modified by human hands, both ancient and modern. Stone platforms created terraced levels, leading down to a central area where water pooled in a perfectly circular basin. Surrounding the basin, crude stone columns supported a roof free of stalactites, suggesting deliberate clearing. "My God," whispered one of the researchers. "It's a temple." On the walls, primitive paintings depicted human figures transforming into wolves, stick-like humans gradually gaining canine features across a sequence of images. Above them, a circle clearly representing the full moon watched over the transformation. "This predates written history," the archaeologist on the team murmured. "These paintings could be 15,000 years old." "Your father didn't discover something new," Vance said to Elias, his voice hushed despite himself. "He rediscovered something ancient." The tracking device led them past the ancient artwork to a section of the chamber that showed signs of recent habitation. Modern equipment, a camp stove, sleeping bag, storage containers had been set up alongside primitive stone structures. On a flat rock that served as a table lay an open journal beside scientific instruments, microscope, centrifuge, test tubes, all battery-powered or hand-operated. Marcus had created a functional laboratory in this underground sanctuary. Howard whistled softly. "Your father's been busy." Elias approached the journal, drawn by the familiar handwriting. The most recent entry was dated just yesterday, full moon tonight. "Final phase approaching. The changes are accelerating now. Bone density, muscle transformation, neural reconfiguration. Pain is significant but manageable. The pack has gathered in the outer chambers, waiting. Sylvia remains by my side constantly now, as if she understands the significance of timing. Northland's teams are getting closer. If they find me before completion, everything will be lost. The ancient knowledge, the potential for harmony between species, will become just another pharmaceutical patent, another exploitation of nature's wisdom. If Elias is reading this, and somehow I sense he will be, know that this was my choice. The cancer would have taken me 20 years ago. Instead, I've lived a life beyond imagination, glimpsed mysteries few humans have witnessed since our ancestors painted these walls. Don't mourn what I'm becoming. Celebrate what I've discovered. Beneath the journal lay a small wooden box, intricately carved with wolf motifs. Elias opened it to find a glass vial containing dark liquid and a handwritten label. Reversal Agent Experimental. His father had been developing an antidote. Before Elias could process this discovery, the security team's radios crackled with urgent voices. Movement at the perimeter. Multiple heat signatures approaching rapidly. The pack was coming. Howard met Elias's eyes, then deliberately knocked over a case of equipment. In the ensuing confusion, he called out, "I'll secure the entrance," and headed back the way they'd come. The distraction they'd planned. Vance barked orders as his team scrambled to establish a defensive position. "Tranquilizers ready. Remember, we need specimens alive." In the chaos, Elias palmed the vial of reversal agent and slipped into the shadows of a side passage, following the most recent tracks that marked his father's path. Behind him, he heard the first howls echoing through the chamber. Not ordinary wolf vocalizations, but something that blended animal sound with almost human resonance. The pack had arrived, and with moonrise less than an hour away, Elias knew time was running out to find his father. The narrow passage Elias followed twisted deeper into the mountain, illuminated only by his flashlight. The sounds of conflict, shouts, growls, equipment clattering, faded behind him. The air grew warmer, humid with a mineral tang that coated his tongue. His father's tracks led onward, distinctive boot prints gradually becoming less defined, more animal-like. In places, claw marks scored the stone walls at shoulder height. The passage opened into a smaller chamber, this one entirely natural with no signs of human modification. Thermal springs bubbled along one wall, filling the space with steam and the scent of sulfur. Perfect conditions for the exotic plants that grew here in abundance, species Elias recognized from his father's journals as components of the transformation remedy. A living pharmacy, hidden within the mountain. Movement caught his eye, a shadow shifting in the mist. Elias froze, hand moving to his father's pocket knife. "Dad," he called softly. "It's me." The shadow stilled. Then from the steam a figure emerged. Marcus Grant stood upright, but no longer fully human. His once athletic frame had grown leaner, more sinewy. Grey-streaked hair now extended down his neck, blending into what could only be described as a partial pelt across his shoulders and arms. His hands had elongated, fingers tipped with dark, curved nails. Most striking were his eyes, still recognizably his father's in shape, but with irises that had expanded. Golden and reflective in the flashlight beam, Elias, his voice was rough, as if rarely used, but the recognition in it was unmistakable. "Dad," Elias whispered, emotions overwhelming him after 20 years of absence. Of questions, Marcus approached cautiously. Movements fluid in a way that reminded Elias of Sylvia. He stopped several feet away, nostrils flaring as he scented the air. "You followed her." "Just as I hoped." His speech was deliberate, each word seemingly requiring concentration. "I found your cabin." "Your research." Elias swallowed. "And the pups." A strange expression crossed Marcus's transformed face, something between a smile and a grimace. "My children different. But mine. Northland Pharmaceuticals is here. They have the pups. They've been tracking you," Marcus growled, the sound startlingly non-human. "Using me. Studying me. For years." He gestured to a scar on his forearm. "Tracking device. Removed it. But too late. They know about the sanctuary. They're in the main chamber now. The pack will delay them." Marcus's gaze shifted to the chamber entrance. "But not for long. Moon rises soon." Elias felt the weight of the reversal agent vial in his pocket. "I found your antidote." His father's expression changed, becoming more recognizably human. Surprise, then something like sorrow. "Not antidote, regulator, slows process." He touched his chest. "Cancer returns if transformation stops." "Impossible choice. There has to be another way," Elias insisted. "Come back with me." "With modern medicine, no time." Marcus pointed upward, indicating the moon's imminent rise. "Final phase begins soon, consciousness. Fragments during change. Human thoughts. Harder to hold." As if to emphasize his point, Marcus winced, doubling over. A tremor ran through his body. When he straightened, his features had shifted subtly, more pronounced brow, jawline elongating. "What can I do?" Elias asked, desperation in his voice. Marcus moved to a natural stone shelf where objects were arranged with careful precision. At its center stood a clay vessel, ancient in design but recently made. Symbols matching those in the cave paintings adorned its surface. Inside, a dark liquid caught the flashlight's beam. "The catalyst," Marcus explained. "Complete transformation. One direction only." His eyes met Elias's. "My choice. You're going to drink it," Elias realized. "Become a wolf permanently, not just wolf. Something between something older than both." Marcus gestured to the cave paintings. "First people knew. Lived in harmony with both natures." Another spasm racked Marcus's body, stronger than before. When it passed, his breathing had changed, becoming deeper, raspier. "Why?" Elias asked. "Why choose this? Life, connection, freedom from human isolation." His father's transformed hand reached out, almost touching Elias's face before withdrawing. "Found peace here, found family." From the passage came sounds of approaching footsteps, voices. Vance's team had broken through. Marcus grabbed Elias's shoulder with surprising strength. "Must decide now. They will capture, experiment, exploit." He pushed the clay vessel into Elias's hands. "Destroy this, or drink it. Your choice. Drink it?" "Dad, I can't." Blood tests show changes already beginning. Berries, plants, years in forest. Marcus's speech was deteriorating, words coming with visible effort. "The gift. Already in your cells." The voices grew closer. Flashlight beams probed the passage entrance. Marcus backed away toward another exit, barely visible behind a curtain of steam. "Sylvia waits." Pack needs leader. Don't go, Elias pleaded. Always loved you. Choice was never. Between you and this was dying cancer. Marcus's form began to blur into the mist. Find me under moon, if ready. The last Elias saw was his father's eyes, still recognizably human, despite their transformed appearance, filled with a mixture of sorrow and wild joy. Then Marcus was gone, vanished into the deeper passages. Elias stood alone, holding the clay vessel of catalyst. As Vance's team burst into the chamber, tranquilizer rifles raised. Their flashlight beams cut through the steam, finally settling on Elias, standing alone, with the clay vessel in his hands. "Where is he?" Vance demanded, scanning the mist-filled space. "Gone," Elias replied simply. Vance gestured to his security team. "Search every passage." He can't have gotten far. His attention fixed on the vessel Elias held. "What's that?" Before Elias could react, a researcher snatched the clay vessel from his hands. The man peered inside, eyes widening at the dark liquid. "It's the catalyst," the researcher reported, excitement bleeding into his professional tone. The complete formula. Vance's expression shifted from frustration to triumph. "Secure it." "Full containment protocols." He turned to Elias. "You spoke with him. What did he tell you?" Elias remained silent, mind racing. Outside, through the rock ceiling of the chamber, he sensed rather than saw the full moon rising. "Time was running out. Moonrise in 17 minutes, announced one of the technicians, confirming Elias's instinct. "Atmospheric conditions optimal. If the subject's transformation pattern follows the documented cycle, the final phase begins then." "Find him," Vance ordered again. "I want monitoring equipment set up. Full video and biometric capture." As the team dispersed, Elias noticed Howard being led into the chamber by a security guard. His hands zip-tied in front of him, tried to sabotage the equipment, the guard explained. "Disabled 2 of the ATVs. Vance barely spared Howard a glance. "Secure him here. We'll deal with federal interference charges later." The researcher who had taken the clay vessel was carefully transferring its contents into sterile containers, muttering scientific observations as he worked. Another team member collected samples of the thermal spring water and the plants growing around it. "Sir," called a security officer from one of the side passages. "We found something." The team converged on the passage, leaving only one guard watching Elias and Howard. From where they stood, Elias could hear exclamations of surprise. "It's a complete chronicle," someone said. "Transformation documentation from the beginning stages. Photos, tissue samples, genetic sequencing. There's more," another voice added. "Historical records. Folklore accounts. This goes back centuries." Vance emerged from the passage carrying a leather-bound volume. "Your father was quite the historian," he said to Elias. "This details transformation accounts dating to the 1700s, names, locations, documented cases." He flipped through pages with reverent care. A complete scientific and historical record of what he calls the joining. The guard watching Elias and Howard suddenly stiffened, hand going to his radio. "Base camp reports wolf activity increasing. Team at the cave entrance is requesting backup." Vance hesitated, clearly torn between securing the scientific treasure trove and pursuing Marcus. "Take 4 men to the entrance. The rest continue searching these passages." As the team redistributed, Elias caught Howard's eye. The older ranger nodded slightly toward their single remaining guard, whose attention was divided between them and his radio updates. "It's getting worse up there," the guard reported. "Multiple wolves, behaving abnormally. Coordinated movements," Vance snapped. "Maintain position." "We need." A howl cut through the chamber, close, powerful and haunting in its complexity. "Not quite wolf, not quite human." It was answered by another, then another, echoing through the passages from different directions. "They're inside the cave system," the guard said, unnecessarily. Raising his tranquilizer rifle, Elias felt something stir within him, a resonance with those howls that vibrated in his chest, in his blood. The berries and plants he'd consumed over years of following his father's wilderness practices had indeed prepared him. changed him in subtle ways he was only now becoming aware of. In the momentary distraction, Howard moved with surprising speed for his age. He rammed his shoulder into the guard, sending the man stumbling back. The tranquilizer rifle discharged harmlessly into the ceiling. "Run!" Howard shouted to Elias. "Find your father!" Elias didn't hesitate. As Vance shouted orders and the team scrambled to respond to threats from multiple directions, he slipped into the passage where he'd last seen Marcus. Behind him, chaos erupted. The howls grew louder, more numerous. The pack had found a way into the inner chambers. The passage climbed steeply upward, zigzagging through the mountain. Elias followed it by instinct more than sight, his flashlight abandoned in the confusion. Strangely, the darkness seemed less absolute than it should have been. Details of the stone walls, visible as if his eyes were adapting unnaturally fast. He emerged onto a ledge high on the mountainside. The full moon hung enormous in the clear night sky, bathing the wilderness in silver light. Below, the valley stretched like a river of shadow between moonlit peaks. A soft sound made him turn. Sylvia stood several yards away, her silver coat luminous in the moonlight. Beside her was Marcus, his transformation now visibly progressing. He still stood upright, but his form was changing, flowing like water from one state to another. "Dad," Elias whispered. Marcus looked at him with eyes that were losing their human shape, but none of their awareness. He raised a hand, more paw than fingers now, and pointed to what Elias held clutched in his fist. Elias opened his palm to reveal a small object he'd grabbed during the chaos, his father's old ranger badge, pried from the cover of one of the historical volumes. Tarnished silver, engraved with his father's name and service dates, the moonlight transformed the mountain wilderness into a silvered dreamscape. Elias stood on the ledge, the tarnished ranger badge gleaming in his palm, watching his father's metamorphosis accelerate under the full moon's influence. Marcus's face elongated, features flowing like wax near flame. His spine curved, body reshaping itself according to ancient patterns encoded in his transformed DNA. Yet despite the physical changes, his eyes remained focused, aware, neither fully human nor entirely wolf, but something that existed in the borderland between. "Is this what you want?" Elias asked, his voice catching. "To leave humanity behind completely?" Marcus made a sound, not speech, not quite a growl. Sylvia moved closer to him, her silver coat brushing against his transforming form. The intimacy of the gesture spoke volumes. From below came shouts and the beams of powerful flashlights as Vance's team emerged from another cave opening, spreading out to search the mountainside. "They're coming," Elias warned. "They want to capture you. Study the transformation." Marcus looked toward the approaching lights. Then back to Elias. With visible effort, he formed words through a mouth no longer shaped for human speech. "Choice. Yours now." He gestured toward the valley, where more wolves had appeared, gathered in a loose semicircle at the base of the cliff.
"Family!"
Either side, Elias understood. His father was offering him a place in either world, to remain human or to follow the path of transformation. The beginning changes in his own body, triggered by years of consuming the plants his father had documented, meant either option was possible. "But the pups," Elias said. "Northland has them." At this, both Marcus and Sylvia's postures changed. Alert, tense. Marcus struggled against his advancing transformation to speak again. "Must free them." He pointed to the vial of reversal agent Elias had taken from the laboratory. "Not for me. For you, if you choose." The implications were clear. Marcus had created the reversal agent not for himself but for Elias and perhaps for the pups, ensuring they would have a choice he no longer wanted. A sharp crack echoed across the mountainside as one of Vance's team spotted them. A tranquilizer dart embedded itself in the rock near Elias's foot. "There!" On the ledge came a shout from below. Marcus's transformation had reached a critical threshold. He dropped to all fours, his body now more wolf than human, though larger and with a presence that radiated ancient power. Sylvia pressed against him supportively as he struggled with the final stages of the change. Elias made his decision. He uncorked the reversal agent, but instead of drinking it, he secreted it safely in an inner pocket of his jacket. "I'll free the pups," he promised. "And protect your sanctuary." Marcus's transformed eyes held his for a long moment. Gratitude, love, and wild freedom mingled in their amber depths. Then he threw back his head and released a howl that was echoed by every wolf in the valley. The sound resonated through Elias's bones, stirring something deep and primal. More shouts from Vance's team, closer now. Another dart whistled past. "Go," Elias urged. "I'll hold them off." Marcus hesitated, clearly torn between flight and protecting his son. Sylvia made the decision, nudging him firmly away from the ledge toward a narrow trail that led higher into the mountains. Marcus gave Elias one final look, then turned and loped away with Sylvia, their forms quickly blending into the moonlit wilderness. Elias faced the approaching team, positioning himself to block their pursuit. Vance reached the ledge first, breathing hard, his face flushed with exertion and excitement. "Where is he?" he demanded, gesturing for his security team to spread out. "Gone," Elias said simply. Back to his true family, Vance studied the empty mountainside, frustration evident. "You let him complete the transformation. Do you realize what you've done? The scientific breakthrough lost." "Nothing's lost," Elias replied, "except your chance to exploit it." From his pocket, Elias withdrew a small object he'd taken during the chaos in the laboratory, a microchip no larger than his thumbnail. The tracking device the researchers had been following, removed from his father's body, but kept as a precaution. "You'll never find him without this," Elias said, holding the chip over the steep drop. "And his research is incomplete without his guidance." Vance's expression hardened. "What do you want, Ranger Grant?" "The wolf pups released, unharmed, and every sample, every record you've collected." "Don't be ridiculous. That research is worth billions, and worth nothing if you can't find the source or complete the work." Elias let the microchip slip slightly in his fingers. "My father spent 20 years unlocking these secrets. You need me to interpret his notes, his methods." Vance hesitated, calculating. "We could simply take you into custody. Force cooperation. And I could destroy everything I know." Elias held the tracking chip higher. "One move from your men and this goes over the cliff." Below, the wolf pack had begun to move, circling around Vance's scattered team members, who raised their tranquilizer rifles nervously. "Call them off," Vance ordered. "They don't answer to me," Elias replied truthfully. "Not yet, anyway." A standoff settled over the mountainside, punctuated by the occasional growl from the wolves below. The full moon climbed higher, casting hard shadows across the wilderness that had become the battleground for two very different visions of the future. Spring came to the mountains with the gradual retreat of snow and ice, revealing the first green shoots pushing through softened earth. Elias stood on the porch of his cabin, no longer just a ranger outpost, but a research station protected by newly established boundaries. The agreement reached that Moonlit Night had held, though not without complications. Northland Pharmaceuticals had official research rights to specific compounds derived from the alpine plants, but the wolf territory was now a protected sanctuary, off-limits to development or intrusion. The wolf pups had been released back into the wild, though not before Elias had administered the reversal agent, halting their partial transformation at a stage that would allow them to live safely among their pack. Howard stepped onto the porch, coffee mug in hand. "Chopper's coming at noon. Board members want the quarterly report in person," Elias nodded. The compromise he'd brokered had created a unique position for himself, liaison between Northland's careful, limited research and the protected wilderness. His father's discoveries were being developed into promising cancer treatments without exploiting the transformation process itself. "I'll be ready," Elias said. "Did you finish the habitat survey?" "All mapped according to your specifications. No research activity within 3 miles of the den sites." Howard took a sip of coffee. "Though our friends haven't been making it easy for the boundary patrols." "They're testing us," Elias replied with a slight smile. making sure we honor our side of the agreement. In the months since that night, the wolf pack had maintained a watchful presence around the sanctuary borders. Their behavior remained unusual by conventional wildlife standards, coordinated, deliberate, intelligent in ways that the research team documented but couldn't fully explain to their corporate supervisors. Only Elias knew the full truth. Only he had seen what his father had become. From the inner pocket of his jacket, Elias removed a small leather case that never left his person. Inside was the vial of reversal agent, half empty now after treating the wolf pups, enough remaining for one adult dose. His insurance policy, his choice preserved in liquid form. The changes in his own body had stabilized at a subtle level, enhanced senses, unusual stamina, a connection to the wilderness that went beyond trained observation. Not enough to mark him as different to casual observers, but sufficient to allow him to communicate in limited ways with the pack and with his father. Howard knew only that Marcus was alive somewhere in the wilderness. The official story, carefully constructed and supported by selectively shared journal entries, was that Marcus had discovered medical compounds that cured his cancer while living in isolation. His current whereabouts were officially unknown, though regular tributes of food and supplies left at the cave entrance disappeared promptly. "You going out again tonight?" Howard asked, a knowing tone in his voice. "Full moon," Elias replied simply. Once each month, when the moon reached fullness, Elias would hike to a particular ridge overlooking the valley. There, in the silver light, the pack would gather. Among them, always, the large male with intelligent eyes and the silver female who never left his side. They would watch as Elias shared news of the research progress, the sanctuary protections, the world beyond the wilderness. Sometimes on these nights, Elias would remove the vial from its case, considering. The pull of the wild grew stronger with each visit. The reversal agent would soon lose its efficacy as his own subtle transformation progressed. The choice would become permanent one way or another. A distinctive bird call drew his attention to the forest edge. Not a bird at all, but a signal. Through the trees, Elias caught a flash of silver fur, Sylvia watching the cabin. In daylight, unprecedented. "I need to check something," he told Howard, trying to keep his voice casual. "Radio if the helicopter arrives early." He walked unhurriedly until he reached the tree line, then moved quickly to where he'd seen the wolf. Sylvia waited, uncharacteristically visible in the morning light. She turned and trotted several yards, then looked back expectantly. Following, Elias found himself on a game trail he knew well. The wolf maintained distance, but remained in sight, leading him deeper into the protected territory. After nearly a mile, they reached a small clearing where sunlight dappled the forest floor. There, placed carefully on a flat rock, lay an object that stopped Elias in his tracks, a handcrafted wooden flute, newly made but identical to one his father had carved for him when he was a boy. Beside it lay a freshly killed rabbit arranged with deliberate care, a gift, an invitation, a bridge between worlds. Sylvia watched from the edge of the clearing as Elias lifted the flute. The craftsmanship was unmistakable, his father's hands, changed but still capable of creating beauty, of remembering shared moments from a human past. Elias raised the flute to his lips and played a simple melody his father had taught him 30 years before. The notes drifted through the spring air, carrying with them memories, connections, possibilities. From deeper in the forest came an answering howl, not quite wolf, not quite human. Sylvia turned to leave, her message delivered. Elias pocketed the flute and picked up the rabbit. Tonight he would come to the ridge as always, but something told him the meeting would be different. A new phase was beginning. He glanced at the leather case containing the reversal agent. Soon he would need to decide which world truly called him home. Moonlight bathed the ridge in silver radiance, turning the familiar landscape into something ancient and mysterious. Elias sat on a flat boulder, the wooden flute in his hands, watching as the wolf pack gathered in the valley below. Their numbers had grown over the past year. Healthy pups from multiple females, territory expanding under the protection of the sanctuary. The meeting with Northland's board had gone as expected. Clinical trials for the cancer treatment derived from his father's research showed unprecedented success rates. They'd named it Luperine, never knowing the full story behind its discovery. The pharmaceutical executives celebrated their billion-dollar breakthrough, while remaining oblivious to the deeper mystery unfolding in the protected wilderness. A movement to his right, Sylvia emerged from the shadows, her silver coat luminous under the full moon. She approached closer than usual, pausing just yards away. Her amber eyes held Elias's with familiar intelligence. Behind her, a larger form appeared. Marcus, in his transformed state, still walked on 4 legs. His body structured like a wolf, but larger, more powerful. His fur had the same silver-grey streaking that his hair once showed. But it was his eyes that revealed his true nature. Still, his father's eyes, holding human awareness within their animal shape. "Hello, Dad," Elias said softly. Marcus settled on his haunches beside Sylvia, regarding his son with unmistakable recognition. After a moment, he turned his head toward the ridge's edge, where the sanctuary spread below them, secured now by legal protections and Elias's careful stewardship. The message was clear: approval, gratitude. "The treatment is working," Elias continued, knowing his father understood. 17 patients in complete remission, hundreds more beginning therapy. He smiled slightly. "You should see the corporate excitement. If they only knew." Marcus made a sound, not quite a growl, not quite a laugh. From his pack, Elias removed a small object wrapped in oilcloth. He unwrapped it carefully to reveal a worn leather journal, the last of his father's chronicles, rescued from Northland's research archives through careful negotiation. "I brought this back where it belongs," he said, placing it on the rock between them. "The knowledge is protected now. The essence of what you discovered is helping people without revealing everything." Marcus approached cautiously, sniffing the journal. His transformed paw reached out, touching the leather cover with deliberate gentleness. The gesture was so human, it caught in Elias's throat. From the valley below, the wolf pups, his half-siblings, played at the edge of the pack, their movements showing the perfect balance Elias had hoped for when administering the reversal agent. Wolf enough to belong with their kind, human enough to carry a spark of heightened awareness that would pass to future generations. Sylvia watched them with evident pride, then turned her attention back to Elias. She approached closer until she stood directly before him. With deliberate care, she placed something at his feet, a small, perfectly formed pine cone, the same offering she had made to his father 20 years before, when Marcus had first gained her trust. Elias picked up the pine cone, turning it in his fingers. "Are you sure?" he asked, looking from Sylvia to Marcus. "Is there room for both of us in your world?" Marcus made a soft sound, moving to stand shoulder to shoulder with Sylvia. Together, they watched Elias with patient expectation. From his pocket, Elias withdrew the leather case containing what remained of the reversal agent. The vial caught the moonlight, its contents glimmering with possibility, the ability to halt his own gradual transformation, to remain fully human, to return to civilization permanently. He considered it one last time, then carefully set it atop the journal. "I don't need this anymore," he said simply. Raising the wooden flute to his lips, Elias played the melody his father had taught him, the notes soaring clear and true in the night air. As he played, he felt the subtle changes in his body accelerating, slightly, responding to his decision, to the moonlight, to the acceptance of what he was becoming. Not a full transformation like his father's. The reversal agent he'd taken months ago had ensured that, but enough to exist in both worlds. A bridge between species, between wilderness and civilization, protector of the sanctuary and its secrets. When the melody ended, Elias stood. With careful movements, he removed his ranger badge and placed it alongside the journal and reversal agent, symbols of a chapter now closing. Marcus approached, pressing his transformed body against Elias's leg in a gesture unmistakably like an embrace. Sylvia joined him, the three of them connected in the moonlight. "Let's go home," Elias said softly. Together they descended from the ridge into the valley, where the pack waited. The half-moon territory would remain his for as long as needed. The cabin, the research station, his duties to the human world. But on nights like this, under the full moon, he would join his father in the deeper wilderness, learning the ancient ways that connected their bloodline to the wolves. Behind them on the ridge, the moonlight illuminated the small arrangement of objects, journal, vial, badge, arranged in a careful circle. Knowledge preserved, choice honored, legacy protected, and below, the shadows of two men and a silver wolf merged into the primeval forest, three silhouettes becoming indistinguishable beneath the ancient light of the moon.